everybody. What's up? We're doing chapter 21, Determined Soldiers, and this is about African American soldiers that we've talked about that fought in this war. And we need to remember that it wasn't just white soldiers stopping slavery and Lincoln stopping slavery. They did their part, and there were certainly many people who wanted to fight to free the slaves. That definitely did happen. However, there were a lot of African Americans that fought to free themselves and to free other African Americans and to stop slavery. And they volunteered, and more percentages of African Americans fought that were there than the white northern people. So percentage-wise. Of course, there were more, but I think there was a large amount, a quarter or a third of the army was African American towards the end. At the beginning, they didn't even let them fight. It's just unbelievable. As a matter of fact, Frederick Douglass, one of our heroes we learned about, had an interesting quote about that. That's right here, if you want to put it on. It's that purple. What upon earth is the matter with the American people? The national edifice is on fire. Every man who can carry a bucket of water is wanted. Yet government leaders refuse to receive the very class of men which is a deeper interest in the defeat and humiliation of the rebels than all others. Such is the pride, the stupid prejudice, and folly that rules the hour. Frederick Douglass, black abolitionist leader. But eventually they did come to common sense and started beginning to stop their bigotry and slavery and racism. And they finally let African Americans fight. And they fought bravely. And it's funny too. People were, ooh, wow, they're brave and fight hard. What do you expect? They're men. But at least they earned the respect when they had a chance to get it. That's nice. But it's just stupid they had to earn it. Like, why wouldn't you think they'd be brave? I just don't understand. All right, well, that's racism and bigotry, obviously. All right, so what would you think if you learned that a large group of strong men who wanted to fight for the Union were turned down? Would you think that was dumb? You're right. It was worse than dumb. It was idiotic. But racial prejudice is always like that. It is always stupid. Prejudice turns up in all times and places, but in the 19th century it was a sickness that infected much of the nation, North as well as South. If the South had been without prejudice, there would have been no war. If the North had been without prejudice, the war might have been much shorter. There were large numbers of blacks who wanted to fight in the war. Because of racial prejudice, the Union Army wouldn't have them, at least not at first. Now, this may sound ridiculous to you, but many people actually believe that blacks couldn't fight. That is what they believed and said. Many whites had forgotten or never knew that blacks had been explorers and mountain men and early settlers. African Americans fought in the Revolutionary War and the War of 1812. Of course they wanted to fight in this war, but neither side would have them as soldiers. Not the North or the South. In the South, slaves helped the war effort. They had no choice. They raised crops and did farm work so that white men were free to be soldiers. Slaves worked in southern factories. Yes, the South did have ironworks and factories, just not as many as the North had. Rebel armies used slaves to build and cook and do other necessary work. The Confederacy could not have fought long without slaves. When they could, African Americans ran away to the Yankee army camps. At first, the Union officers didn't know what to do with them. A few sent the slaves back to slave masters, but most let them stay. The Union officers called the blacks contrabands. Contraband of war is property seized from the enemy. especially property that can help the war effort. Soon the contrabands are doing useful work for the Northern armies. But what they really wanted to do was to fight. They wanted to fight because they cared about America as much as anyone else. They wanted to fight because they knew that fighting men would never be thought of as slaves again. They wanted to fight because they knew, long before most white people, this was a war about slavery. Finally, it became possible. A month after Lincoln read the Emancipation Proclamation, a group of black contrabands fought as soldiers in Missouri. 10 died. The first black combat victims of the war. Soon there were legions of black soldiers. They fought well. The Assistant Secretary of War visited General Grant's army and said that the bravery of the blacks completely revolutionized the sentiment of the army. I heard prominent officers who formerly in private had sneered at the idea of Negroes fighting express themselves after that is heartily in favor of it. So even though it's bad that these officers didn't think that African Americans could fight it first, at least they found out they could and changed their minds. So that's good. Should never have to happen in the first place, but that's good. Now we're going to learn about a Massachusetts troupe that has a famous movie after it, Glory. It's always on TV, great movie. I recommend, if your parents let you, to watch it. Okay, Massachusetts organized a regiment of black soldiers called the 54th Massachusetts, under the command of a young white Bostonian, Colonel Robert Gould Shaw. The men of the 54th Massachusetts led a bayonet attack on Fort Wagner, a massive fort of wood and earth that stood on an island at the entry to Charleston Harbor. The Confederates, protected by the thick walls of the fort, shot cannons and naval guns at the charging men. Almost half of them were wounded, captured, or killed. After that, no one asked if blacks could fight. Prejudice is down, wrote a man who was there. Everyone knew it took special courage for blacks to fight and for white officers to fight with them. They realized that if they were captured, they would not be treated like the other soldiers. As a matter of fact, Robert Gould Shaw was killed and buried with his men in a mass grave. And his father said he was very proud of that. They didn't capture African American soldiers, they shot them, even if they surrendered. The Confederacy did that, the South. And they would shoot white officers that would lead them as well. That's pretty racist. Confederate officials had announced that any captured white Northern officers who led black troops would be put to death as criminals. Captured black soldiers knew they would be sold into slavery if they weren't murdered. Nonetheless, they kept volunteering. Before the war was over, more than 180,000 black soldiers fought with the Union Army. Lincoln said they made victory possible. In 1864, a newspaper reporter wrote about black troops marching in New York City. He said, "Had any man predicted it last year, he would have been thought a fool. 8 months ago, the African race in this city were literally hunted down like beasts in the New York race riots. They fled for their lives. How astonishingly has this been changed. The same men now march in solid platoons, with shouldered muskets, slung knapsacks, and buckled cartridge boxes down through our gayest avenues, to the pealing strains of martial music, and are everywhere saluted with waving handkerchiefs, with descending flowers." The New York Times reporter said that the marching soldiers were a sign of the marvelous times. He also said there was a revolution of the public mind. What did he mean by that? And what did Abraham Lincoln mean when he said, "And given freedom to the slave, we assure freedom to the free"? So it is nice that New York City, who had been so racist at the time in the North, they came around and changed their mind. because the African Americans fought so bravely. So again, it's terrible that that even had to happen, but it's good that it was fixed. So that's good. And now, today, we're going about Reconstruction, about the way that originally the America tried to bring African Americans to important citizenship, especially down south of this country. Unfortunately, that failed. Despite Lincoln, who's died and might have survived with him, Grant tried to do it, but once they were done, compromises were made, and African Americans were not treated well for the next 100 years. And we'll discuss that. This is the beginning of it, the Reconstruction. All right. So again, bad news about some of the racist stuff we have to learn, but good news about how the African Americans fought in the Civil War. All right. Bye.